So today, we're going to tackle one of the biggest, most deep-seated assumptions in learning any language. This idea that the ultimate goal is to sound native. We're going to explore a much more powerful and frankly more realistic way of thinking about English in the world we actually live in.
All right, think about this for a second. For anyone who's ever learned English, or any language really, what's the big prize? What's that one thing you're always told to aim for?
Yep, there it is. For decades, this has been the answer. To sound like you were born and raised in London, or New York, or Sydney. This was it. The gold standard, the undisputed champion of language goals. But here's the kicker. What if it's the completely wrong goal?
Okay, so let's get right into it. We're going to start by tearing down this whole native speaker ideal and show why it's really becoming a myth, a totally outdated model for how our world actually works now. So have a look at this. On the left, you've got the old-school native speaker model. It's built on the idea that the monolingual way is the normal way, and it sets up this power dynamic where native is automatically seen as the best. But then, look at the right. That's the world today. Most of the planet is multilingual. And get this, most conversations in English are happening between multilingual speakers. The old model is a one-way street. Reality is a cooperative exchange.
And here's the bottom line. Chasing this native ghost isn't just a waste of time, it can be actively harmful. It creates so much anxiety for learners, and it can lead to very real discrimination in jobs and in schools, all based on a really flawed idea of what good communication even is.
Okay, so if we're throwing out that old native target, what do we replace it with? What should we be aiming for instead? Well, the answer is actually a lot simpler and, I think, a lot more powerful: connection. And this brings us to this really important idea: English as a lingua franca, or LF for short. Now, this isn't some new version of English. It's a whole new way of seeing English. The goal completely shifts. It moves from imitation to simply successful communication. It's not about sounding like someone else. It's just about making sure you're understood. This quote just nails the mindset shift we're talking about. All those things that teachers might circle in red pen and call errors or mistakes, well, in this view, they're actually signs of skill. They show us speakers being creative, adapting the language to get their point across. They're features, not bugs.
And this is the absolute core skill. It's not about memorizing perfect grammar rules, it's about accommodation. It's that ability to adjust how you speak, your speed, your word choice, your phrasing, to make sure the person you're talking to gets it. It's this dynamic, two-way skill, and it is so much more valuable than a perfect accent.
Okay, this all sounds great in theory, right? But what does it mean in practice? If we're not aiming for that native-like perfection, what should we be focusing on? What are the actual rules that matter for being understood all over the world?
This is where it gets super practical. Researchers actually looked into this and identified what they call the lingua franca core. These are the pronunciation skills that are actually critical for being understood. So, as you can see, you really should focus on getting most consonant sounds right. The difference in vowel length, like between ship and sheep, that's important. And stressing the right word in a sentence to get your meaning across. But what shouldn't you lose sleep over? That infamous th sound. Turns out, it's really not as crucial as we've been led to believe for clear global communication. And this view just totally reframes what we think of as grammar mistakes. Things like dropping the S on she go to work, or using who for an object instead of which. These are actually super common functional patterns in global English. And you know what? They almost never, ever cause confusion. They're just efficient adaptations, not failures. Now, this whole idea of ELF, it's not some static thing that was figured out and then just left alone. No, it's been growing and getting deeper over time, really moving from just a linguistic thing to something much, much bigger. Just look at how the thinking has evolved. It started with what we can call ELF1, which was really just about identifying those key features, like the lingua franca core we just talked about. Then came ELF2, this realization that real communication is messy, it's flexible, it all depends on the context. ELF3 was a huge leap, seeing English as just one tool in a multilingual person's toolbox. And that brings us to today, to ELF4, which connects all of this to these massive ideas about social justice, equality, and decolonization in language.
So if you take one thing away from that evolution, it's this massive shift in focus. We're not really just talking about English anymore. We're talking about multilingual people communicating and using English as just one of the many resources they have to connect with one another. It puts the person, not the language, right at the center. And that evolution brings us right up to today and to some really fascinating, kind of mind-bending questions about what all this means for the future of English and, how we should be teaching and learning it.
So let's start with the classroom. If being understood is the real goal, should schools still be spending countless hours drilling students to perfect a th sound? Or should they focus on teaching that lingua franca core, the skills that we know actually make communication clear?
And here's a fun little twist. This isn't just about non-native speakers. What about the native English speakers? Do they have a responsibility to learn new skills, to learn how to accommodate, to maybe stop using such complicated idioms, and to speak more clearly in conversations where they are, in fact, the linguistic minority?
And that leaves us with this final, massive question. What happens next? As literally billions of multilingual speakers keep using and shaping English on their own terms, what is the language going to look like? As the influence of its so-called native speakers fades, what new forms, new words, new rules are going to bubble up? The only thing we know for sure is that the language belongs to every single person who uses it,